cabinet. And he was talking just about how important it was that we ensured that the global economy had access to oil and gas many years in the future. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why we're interested in Venezuela, is because it has such a critical importance, all-important resource called oil. And as much as we talk about the modern economy, the digital economy, the high-tech economy, the president said something that was very, very important and I think should inform a lot of how we think about future growth, which is that as much as data centers and technology and all of these incredible things that we're all working on matter, fundamentally, you still have an economy that runs on real things. And there is no realer thing than oil. And I would add to that, there's no realer thing than critical minerals. And I think a lot of us have learned the hard way, in some ways, over the last year, how much our economies depend on these critical minerals. So every man and woman, I believe, in this room understands what we're confronting together today. And I say together, and that is very much something that is at the heart of Secretary Rubio's initiative, and as he said, at the heart of what we're trying to do all across the administration, is recognize that this is something where our alliances and our friendships can really help one another. We're all on the same team. We're all rowing in the same direction. I believe that in this room, we have close to make ourselves more independent, more self-reliant, and that's what we should be doing. Now, we know that today, the international market for critical minerals is failing. It's failing to create domestic markets or dignified jobs for our labor forces, and it's failing to keep our nation safe. Supply chains remain brittle and exceptionally asset and commodity prices are persistently depressed, driven downward by forces beyond any individual country's control. Now, how many times cumulatively have one of us or many of us in this room heard some variation of the story that I'm about to tell? A lithium mine, a gallium recovery center, you name it, is announced, sometimes with years in planning and financing nearly in place. Then overnight, foreign supply floods the market, the prices collapse, and investors pull out. The project stalls, and eventually the project dies on the vine. We've all seen it firsthand in all of our countries. And the result is a global market where consistent investment is near impossible, and it will stay that way so long as prices are erratic and unpredictable. And that's one of the things that we want to work on with this initiative. Let's make the prices more predictable and less erratic so that we can support the domestic supply chains and the investment that makes those supply chains possible. Now, across Europe, North America, there are dozens of mining and processing initiatives that have been suspended or completely abandoned because sustained price weakness makes financing impossible. Time after time, advanced economies with deep capital markets are finding that projects cannot cost. The same story plays out elsewhere around. In resource-rich developing economies, only a tiny fraction of global mining investment, including from nations, many of them in this room, is reaching the point of actual projects. We plan, we think about it, we even invest a little bit of money, we do the regulatory work, but so many of them die on the vine. Now, everyone knows that these deposits exist. We've mapped a whole lot of them, and we know they're ready to be mined and processed. But capital can't reach them so long as investors lack confidence that those markets are going to remain stable for long enough to justify the long-term commitment. That is the problem that we confront. And even here in the United States, even with all the incredible things that President Trump and the entire administration has done to eliminate permits, to open up the regulatory environment, we have private financing that we've secured, but even in some cases, even in the United States, some of these projects are struggling to attract investors. We see telltale signs of a market distorted beyond recognition, one that punishes strategic investment, one that punishes diversification, and one that punishes long-term planning. This is crazy. We should have the kind of global markets, the kind of domestic markets that reward long-term planning, that reward strategic thinking, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Now, I think every single one of us represented in this room has become dependent on arrangements we did not choose and right now arrangements that we cannot control. We all face the same vulnerability: access to the things that protect our people and sustain our way of life. Everything from missile defense systems to energy infrastructure, to advanced manufacturing, to emerging technologies. The fundamental supply chains that support these industries sometimes can vanish in the blink of an eye without any control or influence from many of the countries in this room. And we in the Trump administration believe it is the business of the government, of the people's government elected just over a year ago, to confront such problems, and that we want to confront them together. And I think that you're all here, at least I hope you're all here, because you all feel the exact same way. Now, our administration came into office last January, barely a year ago, with a clear mandate to reindustrialize the United States of America and return American workers to the center of our economic policy. And that is what we are doing. And I want to tell you just a little story about one of the very first meetings I had with our Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Treasury, two great people, two great business leaders. And I remember saying, we have our views of the Biden administration. We're not particularly fans, as you may have guessed. But setting that to the side, surely the Biden administration put together a list of the critical industries, the critical technologies, the critical manufacturing facilities that are supported by these rare earth minerals, these critical minerals. We may think it's bad work. We may think the people who put it together weren't particularly wise, but surely that gives us some foundation to build on. And I was shocked when our Secretary of the Commerce and Secretary of the Treasury came back to me and said, actually, we have never done this. In the last 4 years, the Biden administration never sat down and tried to understand what are the critical deficiencies in world supply chains. It's insane that we ever got to this point, but in 1 year, the President of the United States has struck dozens of deals to fix that problem. Domestic and foreign producers are both included in this, and we're trying to durable end-to-end supply chains for our country, but also for many of our friends. We've mobilized public financing tools at an unprecedented scale, providing up to $100 billion in lending authority for critical minerals to the Office of Strategic Capital. Marco's now a venture capitalist too. He's got many jobs. We've overturned old orthodoxies and taken direct stakes in high-value mining and processing companies. The United States had not built a primary smelter in this country since 1980, before I was born, 4 years before I was born. In the last month alone, we have announced two, one of which is already fully funded. And on Monday, the Trump administration announced Project Vault, America's first ever domestic critical minerals stockpile. With these moves, we intend to build an ironclad network of new industrial supply chains to span the entire nation. We're going to create good-paying jobs, skilled jobs for the American labor force, and those people, those great workers, are going to be securing a new era of prosperity for American families, and I believe for many people all over the world. But we seek to make sure our friends and our allies are part of this and that you all are covered as well. Our goal here, and the reason why we're doing this conference, is to align trade policy, development finance, and diplomatic engagement towards a shared strategic objective. And that objective is very simple: diversifying global supply in the critical minerals market while strengthening the partner countries who help all of us in this shared effort. Over the past year, our administration has signed agreements, we have launched many joint initiatives, and we have committed extensive resources with many of you in this room, with many governments, and our work extends across disparate regions and all stages of the value chain. We've convened this ministerial in an effort to accelerate that shared work. So this morning, the Trump administration is proposing a mechanism to return the global critical minerals market to a healthier, more competitive state. A preferential trade zone for critical minerals protected from external disruptions through enforceable price floors. We will establish reference prices for critical minerals at each stage of production, pricing that reflects real-world fair market value. And for members of the preferential zone, These reference prices will operate as a floor, maintained through adjustable tariffs to uphold pricing integrity. We want to eliminate that problem of people flooding into our markets with cheap critical minerals to undercut our domestic manufacturers, because we know, of course, that as soon as they've undercut our domestic makers, the domestic markers, they leave the market, and the people who undercut them then jack up the price to a completely fair level. We're going to fix that problem. Together, we want members to form a trading bloc among allies and partners, one that guarantees American access to American industrial might while also expanding production across the entire zone. The benefits will be immediate and durable. Regardless of how much material flows into the global market, prices within the preferential trade zone will remain consistent. Over time, our goal within that zone is to create diverse centers of production, stable investment conditions, and supply chains that are immune to the kind of external disruptions that we've already talked about. For those of you who join, we offer you a necessary foundation for private financing and secure access to the critical mineral supplies your nation would require in an emergency or some other contingency. By regulating imports to preserve free and fair competition within the preferential trading zone, we will elevate our nation's miners and refiners, our investors and our producers alike. We are all on the same team, and we need to create the economic incentives that reward people for investing and building in our countries. Membership will be vital for developing economies seeking to expand mining capacity. And it'll be just as important for the advanced economies that rely on these materials to sustain their advanced industries, to sustain their growth and security. And I want to be clear with every person in this room. While we believe America's market is large enough to create its own critical minerals trading zone, this entire effort will be stronger and far more competitive if we build it together. So I'm pleased that so many of you here today have already signed on to this plan. Some of you have not. And for those not yet there, we hope that today's discussions will encourage you to finalize those agreements as quickly as possible. Now, I know you're going to be hearing from a lot of others in our administration, including our great Secretary of Rubio, I think really the greatest Secretary of State the United States has ever had, and other senior administrators in our team. And I know that Ambassador Greer, our great trade representative, will present further specifics about what he'll be negotiating, what we're calling the Agreement on Trade and Critical Minerals. Knowing Jameson, I know it will be a very productive session, and I know it will be a very detailed session. As all of you who know Jameson well, he is a guy who gets into the details because he knows that that's where the substance of an agreement can really be made. So I want to close, but before I do, let me just reiterate. We here, I think all of us, are friends. We've all spent many years describing this problem. Before I was ever in politics, I would hear politicians and global leaders talk about this problem. For too many of those years, we talked about it, but we refused to actually solve it. The framework before us is a change. It is a practical and enforceable approach to solving the problem, not just complaining about it. Many of you have helped us design it, and we're, of course, constructing it together in real time. So to those of you still on the fence, I say, let's move together. Before you is a chance to lead, to secure your nation's ability to build, to produce, to defend itself. What is before all of us is an opportunity at self-reliance, that we never have to rely on anybody else except for each other for the critical minerals necessary to sustain our industries and to sustain growth. So I propose that we come together and we shape a market worthy of the great men and women of our countries who depend on that market. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm honored by your presence. The President sends his very best regards, and I look forward to everything that we're going to accomplish together. God bless you all, and have fun today.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. As you saw, I have to put my own sign here. It's another job I have. I'm in charge of the signage. No, thank you all for joining us. I can tell you how honored we truly are that all of you would make the trip to be a part of this on such an important topic. And I want to thank the Vice President for coming this morning. I thought it was important you hear from him because it's a priority for this administration at the highest order, as it is, I know, a priority for many of our partners. And our hope is to use both this forum and our position here today to serve as a convener on what really is an international problem, an international situation or an international issue that needs multilateral international solutions. I don't need to explain to anybody here that critical minerals are vital to the devices that we use every single day. They power our infrastructure, our industry, and our national defense, which is something that's not talked about enough, but it's a key part of that. And so our goal is to have a global market that's secure, a global supply that's enduring and is available to everyone, every nation, at an affordable price. That's a top priority of this administration. I want to talk briefly about our politics here domestically, or our policies here domestically, primarily to serve as an example or a reminder of what a priority we give this topic. President Trump, from day one in office, has made clear that economic security is national security. So we, for example, following in March, he issued an executive order to accelerate permitting reform, to increase domestic mining, and to build reliable supply chains, both at home and abroad. And we feel like all of you, our friends and our partners, stand to benefit from the secure supply chains that we want to be a big part of building. In October alone, the United States secured over $10 billion in critical mineral agreements across 5 countries. Our friends and partners stand to, in December, for example, we convened stakeholders from around the world at the Pax Silica Summit. And thank you, Jacob, for doing that. It's launching a partnership dedicated to building a resilient silicone supply chain capable of powering a new era of global prosperity. Pax Silica and artificial intelligence may be the future. Still, the future will never come to pass. None of these things are going to be possible unless we rebuild the factories and reopen the mines upon which these technologies depend. And I want to use a case in point from our own history to highlight this. The United States used to produce its own critical minerals and derivative products like rare earth magnets. Back in 1949, miners in Mountain Pass, California, discovered one of the world's richest mineral deposits. By 1952, the United States, we were mining rare earths there, and that discovery sparked a revolution. American scientists and engineers, alongside innovators from many of the countries that are here today, rushed to discover new applications for these minerals. And with these new technologies, ushered in the jet age. We ushered in the space age. We ushered in the computer age. And then we became blinded by the potential of the technologies those metals enabled, but we neglected their importance. Mining is less glamorous than building computers. It's less glamorous than building cars or airplanes. But building computers and cars and airplanes is less glamorous than designing them. As we embraced what was new and glamorous, we outsourced what seemed old and unfashionable. We allowed, for example, Mountain Pass, and with it most of America's critical mineral industry, to wither and to die so that we could focus on manufacturing. Then we outsourced the manufacturing. And I know this is a story I'm telling, but it's a story many of the advanced economies represented here today understand well. We outsourced the manufacturing so we could focus on designing these goods. And then one day we woke up and we realized we had outsourced our economic security and our very future. We were at the mercy of whoever controlled supply chains for these minerals. So my hope is that we are gathered here today as the first but important step to rectifying this mistake. Together, our collective talent for innovation, where our advantage over rivals has only grown, and to apply it to bringing back manufacturing and reopening mines here in the United States, but also in all the partner nations represented here today. I think it's interesting that about 50 years ago, actually in this very room, ministers from around the world joined Secretary of State Henry Kissinger for the Washington Energy Conference. That meeting took place during a moment where global energy supplies were concentrated, where markets were distorted, and access to a single critical resource, at that time, of course, being oil, had become a tool of political pressure That is the world 50 years ago. That meeting led directly to the creation of the International Energy Agency to coordinate among like-minded partners to secure access to energy commodities. And so today, we return 50 years later in the hopes of advancing a bilateral critical minerals framework agreement to the same end on that front. These frameworks are designed to create alternative sources of supply and to protect every single stage of production, from mining to refining and processing to manufacturing. All of these things, protecting them from non-market disruption. They will provide platforms for coordinating policies that ensure all of our citizens can enjoy abundant and affordable access to these critical minerals. And so we stand ready and intend to work with each country here today to find a specialized role that you can play. If you don't have minerals, you can help refine them. And if the countries gathered here include the largest consumers of critical mineral products, who together have the buying power, collectively, have the buying power to build a more resilient and diverse global market. Everyone here has a role to play, and that's why we're so grateful for you coming and being a part of this gathering that I hope will lead to not just more gatherings, but action. The United States stands ready alongside each of you as we enter this new age of shared prosperity and security. And I want to end by saying that while we intend to play a key role and an important role and to use the size and influence of our markets to drive this, this is an international, multilateral effort, and it only works. You can only have diversity and choice in these markets if it is broadly adopted across multiple countries. So this initiative here today may be one that started with us, but this is not solely an American initiative. This must be an international, global initiative with like-minded countries who all have one thing in common. We want to see a diverse supply of critical minerals and a secure and resilient supply chains across the world so all of our economies can prosper without ever having these things be susceptible, at worst case scenario, being used as leverage against us, or any option that could come to the market that would undermine our collective economic security. So thank you all for being a part of this today. We appreciate it very much. Let me now turn as we'll begin our program here. Minister Hori, I think you're going to, so thank you very much for being here today. Thank you all for being a part of this today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, Your Excellencies and distinguished guests, I am Yuel Hori, State Minister for Foreign Affairs. It is my great honor to address you on behalf of the government of Japan regarding one of the most pressing and crucial we collectively face today, critical mineral supply chains. May I begin with thanking our host. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for the decisive leadership of the United States in convening today's critical minerals ministerial meeting. I first would like to echo the remarks by Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio. Japan shares a deep sense of concern and urgency about the risk of disruptions to critical mineral supply chains. Sitting at the very upstream end of supply chains and being used across a wide range of industries, critical minerals and its stable supply is indispensable to the sustainable development of the global economy. That is precisely why Japan, under Prime Minister Takaichi's leadership, has redoubled its efforts to diversify sources of supply for critical minerals. Recently, Japan designated critical minerals one of the priority areas under the new initiative of promoting bold strategic investment to enhance Japan's resilience and achieve robust economic growth. Amid rising geopolitical risks, Japan will accelerate efforts to secure up sources. At the same time, we will take flexible measures downstream, such as diversifying procurement sources in cooperation with like-minded partners who are here today. In fact, in recent years, we have already witnessed first-hand supply chain disruptions. Even in recent months, this challenge has become further deteriorated. Against such backdrop, we have come to understand that we are in the same boat, as any supply chain disruption would bring significant impact on the global economy. We should work together to address this challenge. To prevent such supply chain disruptions, the key is to diversify supply sources, including the refining and processing of geographically concentrated critical minerals. To do so, it requires a collective action. We must seize this opportunity to advance cooperation among like-minded countries, partners like us. With that in mind, I'm looking forward to the launch of FORGE, the Forum on Resource Geostrategic Engagement. In the next session, Japan strongly believes that FORGE will become an important venue and a vehicle for us to focus on supply chain diversification and ensure policy coordination. Japan stands ready to actively contribute to discussions to further deepen collaboration with partners and to ensure the effective implementation of this initiative. So, how we should move forward from here? On the supply side, diversification is essential. Diversity, as opposed to concentration, is what makes us resilient. This has to be one of our major guiding principles. In this context, I'd like to take a moment to briefly talk about Japan's efforts to date. Japan has been pursuing various projects in cooperation with the United States as well as with stakeholders across the globe in this regard. Diversification of supply sources and enhancement of supply chain resilience has been Japan's top priority for many years, and we have taken policy measures accordingly. Back in 2022, Japan enacted the first ever Economic Security Promotion Act and created new programs with a focus on critical minerals. Just as importantly, Japan has been implementing public-private support measures, including expanding JOGMEC's investment framework, increasing allowable investment ratios, and allocating a total budget of $3.5 billion US. Around this table, there are many partners with enormous potential for the production and refining of rare earth elements as well as other significant critical mineral sources: Angola, Argentina, Australia, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, France. Well, the list goes on and on. Japan is determined to seek robust partnership with you all. As geopolitical risks continue to rise, we will redouble our efforts to secure alternative supply sources and to build more resilient, reliable, and secure global supply chains. Diversity only comes from a collective action. No single country can overcome fragility of critical mineral supply and over-dependence on specific countries on its own. With the launch of FORGE, now it is time for action. On the demand side, it is imperative that we avoid the situation in which critical minerals and their derivatives produced through non-market-based policies or practices crowd out products with distorted price competitiveness and unfairly monopolize the global market. Japan will engage in discussions with like-minded countries, including the United States, the European Union, and others present here in a positive and constructive manner, and will work to build an effective mechanism with industry engagement. In this regard, Japan highly appreciates the US for its decisive leadership. Distinguished colleagues, as we gather today, we are clear-eyed about what our mission is and what our challenges are. Together, we can build on our advantages and make our critical mineral supply chains more resilient. Japan has an unwavering determination to work with you as your trusted partner on every aspect: demand and supply, mining and refining, upstream and downstream, Japan is ready to enhance coordination and collaboration with you all. Together, let's make a meaningful difference. In closing, I thank you for your kind attention. I very much look forward to the discussion today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Hori. It's a privilege to introduce David Copley, Special Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Global Supply Chains at the National Security Council. We're currently serving in the most historic administration in over a century, one that recognizes that a supply chain responsive to national security realities is a prerequisite to long-term economic growth. The decisions we make today about who we partner with are multi-decade decisions. We believe our partners will capture economic growth and value at all layers of the supply chain stack. The AI revolution we're living through is leading to record historic demand for everything, from copper to cobalt, nickel, zinc, aluminum, silicon, and virtually every element on the periodic table. We're also seeing surging demand for products downstream of the supply chain, including manufactured products like smartphone, chips, telecom infrastructure, industrial robots, machinery, and much more. My friends, the pie is rapidly expanding, and the United States accounts for 30% of global consumption. So we're taking steps to narrow the gap between what we produce and what we consume. But in order to merely keep a pace with global demand, in the US and abroad, we need to surge production capacity at home as well as in partner countries. David sits at the very center of this mission. His work is foundational to the strategic resilience of our country. He is tasked with the monumental challenge of de-risking our critical mineral dependencies, ensuring that the United States and our allies remain unassailable in the face of systemic competition. David brings a level of rigor and foresight that is essential for our department's mission and for the country at large. Please join me in welcoming David Copley.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for that. And thank you all for being here today. Thank you to the Vice President for his remarks and for his leadership. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for hosting. And thank you to President Trump for his visionary and forward-leaning leadership on the critical minerals issue. The President understands the need to secure the foundational elements of the modern economy, and he has prioritized this issue as a matter of national security and economic prosperity. I'm going to speak with you all today to provide an overview about what we're doing in the United States to fix the critical minerals problem. We know this is an issue that will require a global solution and teamwork. Of the 57 minerals on our critical minerals list, over a dozen aren't even mined in the United States. So this is truly a global challenge. In the United States, for a number of decades, we've neglected our mining sector and frankly been happy to outsource mining activities to others around the world. We've had some of the worst mine development timelines in the world in the United States, 29 years to build an average mine, because our permitting framework and our litigation framework have been so onerous. Mining in the United States has been perceived as a dirty old world industry, so we haven't had enough young people choosing mining as a career. And we only graduate something like 200 to 250 mining engineers annually. Not good for a country of 340 million people facing a critical problem. But I'm proud to say that under President Trump's leadership, we in the United States have done a complete 180 and again made mining a priority industry for our national development. Because as all of you hopefully understand, minerals are the elemental building blocks of everything we need for our manufacturing sector as we reindustrialize our country. So what are we doing in the United States to fix the problem? Broadly, 4 key initiatives. We're investing in mining projects, we're stockpiling minerals, we're going to protect our mining companies, and we're rebuilding our mining ecosystem. To start, we're investing heavily in mining-specific projects, like recent deals with MP Materials, Lithium Americas, Korea Zinc, Ma'aden, and many, many others. I believe over the next few years, the United States government, between debt and equity, will deploy hundreds of billions of capital into the mining sector to get projects going. We are quite frankly doing things the American government has never done before, like equity investing, so we can get deals to pencil quickly and move forward. We've created public-private minerals investment funds, like our Critical Minerals Consortium with Orion Resources and another partnership with TechMet. Investments is an area of great potential for collaboration with your governments as we look to jointly develop mining projects with partners around the world. Second, we've begun stockpiling minerals. President Trump and Vice President Vance convinced Congress to give us $2 billion this summer to stockpile minerals in our national defense stockpile. That's the largest investment we've made in our defense stockpile since the Cold War ended. And just 2 days ago, the President announced Project Vault, the creation of a national strategic critical minerals reserve, a $12 billion vehicle under our Export-Import Bank. This is the first time in the history of the United States we've ever stockpiled minerals for our civilian economy, to protect our commercial industry and insulate them from the painful effects of supply shocks. Third, we're going to protect our mining companies. We know the mining industry has a problem with commodity pricing caused by strategic dumping and overproduction. Returns in the mining sector, quite frankly, have not been good enough over the last 30 years, at least partially due to this problem. This is a key part of what we want to talk to you all about today. The current state of affairs, in which commodity prices are kept low for geostrategic reasons through overproduction, is damaging to minerals-producing nations by reducing the value of your assets and your tax receipts. And it's equally damaging to consuming nations by harming your national and economic security. The current system doesn't make sense for any of us, but with coordinated global action, as described by the Vice President, we can fix this problem in a way that will be better for both producers and consumers of minerals. And lastly, we are fixing our mining ecosystem in the United States. I mentioned earlier in my remarks that S&P reported 29-year timelines to develop an average mine in the United States. This is completely unacceptable to President Trump and Vice President Vance, and will not continue under their watch. Our leadership have made mining a priority for our country again. We have a federal permitting priority list that has practically never been used for mining projects before. It's like concierge service for federal permitting. In just the last few months, we've added more than 50 projects to this list. We have torn apart and rewritten our federal regulations, and we can now get full environmental impact statements done, the most burdensome part of our permitting process, in less than a month. Our goal is that the United States again becomes a very attractive place for the mining sector, because we intend to mine here and we intend to process minerals here as well. 4 key initiatives. We're investing, we're stockpiling, we're going to protect our mining companies, and we're fixing our mining ecosystem, because this industry is so important to our national development, as I know it is to your countries as well. But most importantly, under President Trump's leadership, we are no longer standing around admiring the problem. We're not spending our time writing 200-page book reports about how important critical minerals are. We have a plan, and we're focused on project execution, getting deals done, getting companies their permits, stockpiling minerals, and hopefully move forward with all of you, our international partners, to protect our mining companies and to rebuild global mining in a fair and balanced way. So we very much appreciate your time and the distances you traveled to be with us here in Washington. We look forward to the discussion, and most importantly, we look forward to working with all of you to make the global mining industry great again. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for your truly historic leadership on this critical issue. And thank you, State Minister Horry and Senior Director Copley, for kicking off our ministerial. I would like to ask press to depart the room before we begin plenary session 1. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, we will now pause for
Test, test. Test.
Hey guys, how are we doing? Thank you for covering this today. It's this critical minerals ministerial is off to a great start. We have 55 partners that we're hoping to enter into collaboration with. Many have already signed on, and the goal here is very simple. We all understand that having a reliable global supply chains and critical minerals and processed and finished materials are critical to everything we do, as I pointed out in my opening statements to the group. And I think this is a broader mistake made by the industrialized and developed world, as we all sort of fell in love with the design of these things, but forgot that in order to design something, you have to be able to build it, and in order to build it, you have to have the fundamental materials necessary to make it with. That's the key goal of a critical mineral supply, and today it's heavily concentrated in the hands of one country. And that lends itself to, at worst case scenario, being used as a tool of leverage in geopolitics, but it also lends itself to any sort of disruptions, like a pandemic or anything that could, political instability, or anything that could happen. And so it's key and important, and I think there's a growing global recognition that we need to have supply chains for critical minerals that are reliable and diverse across the world. Some countries have a number of critical minerals that they have available to them in terms of mining, but just haven't been able to do it because a foreign competitor will come in, they'll gut the price, they'll undercut it through state subsidies and unfair practices, and so it becomes economically unviable to be able to explore for critical minerals. In other cases, it's the processing. Again, it falls victim to the exact same thing. The private sector can't invest in these things because some competitor will come in and they'll basically do it under cost for purposes of establishing market share dominance. And then once they control that industry, and they're the only ones in the world that do, be disrupted if there's any sort of global disruption and so forth. And this is not a sustainable situation. So it's why priority, first we try to lead by example in what we've done here in the United States. And that includes permitting reform that makes it easier to go into this industry on the critical minerals we have here domestically, but also the creating demand, which is what the President announced yesterday by the announcement of a strategic stockpile of critical minerals. But we understand that this is a global challenge that requires a global response. And so we're working here today to forum for that to happen. And part of this is this new initiative, Forge, described earlier. We have a number of countries that have signed on to that and many more that we hope will do so. That was our first session of this Forge initiative. Let me just say I want to thank the Republic of Korea because they've been for their leadership on the previous entity that was filling this gap, which is MSP. But we're moving forward on this thing with Forge, and the purpose of Forge is to foster collaboration and to build a network of partners across the world, and many of whom were in that room today. This afternoon, there'll be additional sessions led by Trade Representative Greer, who's going to present on a price floor mechanism, and that's designed to make sure that these commodities fall below a certain price so that they can become economically viable. The idea is to protect people's investments or investments in these sectors across the world. They'll hear from Secretary of Energy Wright. They'll hear from the Development Finance Corporation. They'll hear from the Ex-Im Bank. They'll hear from the DOR. They're going to showcase financing tools and programs for critical minerals investment. And then Treasury Secretary Bessent is going to close out later tonight, the Ministerial, later this afternoon. We're planning to sign new critical minerals frameworks with several partners later today. And I want to just highlight again, this is really a historic gathering and highlights the billions of dollars the United States government has already committed towards this endeavor, and that's going to enable private sector investment towards creating reliable supply chains that are vital, as I said, to technological and economic strength and also national security. So we thank you again for covering this, and we're grateful for all of our partners that are here today. And as I said, 55 partners, 54 countries in the European Union are here. And we think there are many more countries that are going to be interested in joining this initiative as it moves forward. And I think our team here did a great job of pulling this together. And, of course, the day's not done. All right, let's get to your questions. And I apologize ahead of time. I know I did like a 2.5-hour press briefing late. I can't do that today because they need this room for the family photo. So they have to have us clear out so they could set that up. Okay, so, Tommy, you're going to call people just because if not, they'll get mad that I didn't call them. So they'll blame you.
Yeah,
all right.
First question, Alex Salvi from Newsmax.
Good morning, sir. The United States has a vested interest now in the critical minerals inside of Ukraine following last year's agreement. We know that the United States this week is monitoring and hosting, of course, trilateral talks between Kyiv and Moscow. And while there does seem to be a framework, at least when it comes to security guarantees, when it comes to any territorial disputes, there does not seem to be much movement one way or the other. Is there any progress being made on that front, and do critical minerals play into those conversations? And separately, sir, if I could also ask about the New START treaty with Russia.
Yeah. I don't have any announcement on New START right now. I think the president will opine on it later. Obviously, the president's been clear in the past that in order to have true arms control in the 21st century, it's impossible to do something that doesn't include China because of their vast and rapidly growing stockpile. On the question of the talks, they're today and tomorrow in Abu Dhabi. Look, the good news is that for the first time in a very long time, we have technical teams from both Ukraine and Russia meeting in a forum that we'll also be involved with, and our experts. Steve Woodcoff and Jared Kushner will also be attending for part of that, and we think that's important. And look, I don't want to say talks alone are progress, but it's good that there's engagement going on. I would also want that on things like this, because there's a lot of sensitivities involved in it, progress is probably not going to be known, even via leaks, until we really have a breakthrough. Our goal is to remain committed. We've committed a year to this. We think we've made real progress. If you look at the checklist of open items that existed at this time last year and the checklist of open items that remain now in terms of reaching a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, that list has been substantially diminished. That's the good news. The bad news is that the items that remain are the most difficult ones. And meanwhile, the war continues. So all I can say in that regard is that we are investing at a level, a substantial amount of time and energy to this endeavor. We are going to continue to do everything we can to see if there's a breakthrough. And one of the things to understand about ending armed conflicts is oftentimes it looks totally hopeful. You have this breakthrough that sometimes is unforeseen. That was certainly the case with Gaza, where a lot of people thought that was a hopeless situation, but we kept pushing and pushing, and then circumstances aligned and made it possible. And obviously, that's what we're going to endeavor to do here as well. As far as critical minerals are concerned, look, that's a part of economic prosperity for Ukraine and its future. This war will end at some point, and when it does, Ukraine needs to be able to harness all of the resources of their country, build it. Ukraine has tremendous economic potential. It is a country that could probably double its GDP in the next decade with the right economic moves, and we certainly think that is a part of an enduring peace. And so a lot of work and thinking has gone into that ahead of time, and so that hopefully it will be able to be on as soon as the war comes to a conclusion.
Our next question will be from Julio Iriart from La Nación.
Good morning, Secretary. Specifically, what role can Argentina play in this agreement on critical minerals, and also if U.S. is in talks with Argentina for send their immigrants deported from third countries? Thank you so much.
Yeah, on the second point, I would say, look, we have conversations about countries willing to accept third-party nationals, but we don't have any deal or anything lined up. I know it's been the subject of media leaks, and sometimes those are with malicious intent, but certainly Argentina is a great partner across the board, and at the end of the day, we have tremendous faith, confidence in our relationship with President Milei and his team, and he will always act in the best interest of the people of Argentina, in the national interest of us, so we appreciate that. And on the first point, Argentina is not just has the capability from a natural resources standpoint to be a key partner in critical minerals for the world, not just for the United States, for the world in a way that's good for Argentina. It also has expertise in processing, and which I think is also going to be critically important. So both because of geology, meaning their geographic location, and their expertise, they've already taken tremendous steps, and they were one of our featured speakers in session one. And Foreign Minister Quirino was there because of Argentina's and one of the global leaders in this regard. So both because of the resources available and because of the ability to invest and the expertise they have in the processing, I think Argentina is going to be a key partner for the world, not just for the United States, and certainly being located in the Western Hemisphere is of strategic value both to Argentina but obviously to the United States as well.
Our next question will be from Elizabeth Hagedorn from Al Monitor.
Secretary Rubio, can you confirm the format and location of Friday's talks with Iran and clarify, given that Iran refuses to negotiate its missile program and insists on a right to enrich uranium, is the U.S. open to a compromise if that means reaching a deal to avoid military action? And separately, if I may, how exactly do these negotiations advance President Trump's repeated pledges to help the Iranian protesters, many of whom are likely to see these nuclear talks as legitimizing the very government that violently massacred its own people?
Well, let me first say, just on the logistics, at the end, let me back up and say from a big picture perspective, I think it's pretty clear right now, President Trump is willing to talk to and meet with and engage with anyone in the world. I mean, we don't view meetings as a concession. We don't view meetings as even legitimization. It is our willingness to sit and listen and talk to anyone, any adversary, any ally, obviously, but anyone around the world. And so the president's always been open to that. He showed that in the first administration, and he's showing it again now. And so I think if there's an opportunity to engage directly with counterparts in the Iranian regime, the United States would be open to. We're open to. We thought we had an established forum that had been agreed to. In Turkey, it was put together by a number of partners who wanted to attend and be a part of it. I saw conflicting reports yesterday from the Iranian side saying that they had not agreed to that. So that's still being worked through. At the end of the day, the United States is prepared to engage and has always been prepared to engage with Iran. As far as the topic of those discussions and what the agenda needs to be, look, I think in order for talks to actually lead to something meaningful, they will have to include certain things. And that includes the range of their ballistic missiles. That includes their sponsorship of terrorist organizations across the region. That includes the nuclear program, and that includes the treatment of their own people. The fundamental problem Iran faces and the regime faces right now is that what people are on the streets complaining about, this regime cannot address. They cannot address it because it's economic. Those problems remain. And one of the reasons why the Iranian regime cannot provide the people of Iran the quality of life that they deserve is because they're spending all their money. They're spending all their resources of what is a rich country sponsoring terrorism, sponsoring all these proxy groups around the world, exporting, as they call it, their revolution. But I remind everybody what I've been saying through my entire career in public service. I said it in my hearing when I was asking for confirmation through the Senate. The Iranian people and the Iranian regime are very unalike. In essence, what the Iranian people want, this is a culture with a deep history. These are people that are the leadership of Iran at the clerical level does not reflect the people of Iran. I know of no other country, a bigger difference between the people that lead the country and the people who live there. And so our hope resides in that. As far as the president's views on the way protesters were treated, he was very clear about it. And as you saw, part of what the president said publicly prevented mass executions that were being planned and we're on the precipice of. And obviously beyond that, the president retains a number of options to how he responds to that and future events. But as far as the talks are concerned, I think the Iranians had agreed to a certain format. For whatever reason, it's changed in their system or what have you. We'll see if we can get to the right place. But the United States is prepared to meet with them. I think it was scheduled for Friday. Steve is ready to go. He'll be prepared for that. If the Iranians want to meet, we're ready. They've expressed an interest in meeting and talking. If they change their mind, we're fine with that too. We prefer to meet and talk. I'm not sure you can reach a deal with. We're going to try to find out. We don't see there's any harm in trying to figure out there's something that can be done. This is a president that always prefers a peaceful outcome to any conflict or any challenge.
We have time for one final question. This one from Nahoufal and Ari from Maghreb Arab.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Nofan Hari, Morocco's news agency. My question is with regard to African countries, including Morocco, who is participating today. How do you envision their role in this ministerial and in the forum going forward?
Well, again, it's the same. First of all, this, as I've highlighted before, this is an American initiative to bring people together. We want to serve as the convener, but this is a global challenge. There is not a country in the world that doesn't face this challenge of critical mineral supply chains, just from the perspective of trying to grow economically. Okay, everybody wants to be an AI, everybody a center. Everyone wants to advance industrially and technologically. Everyone wants to be able to defend their national security. All of these things, whether it's a cell phone, a computer, a semiconductor facility, or the weapons that protect your country, all of these things have to be built with components. And these components invariably involve critical minerals that don't just have to be mined, they have to be processed. So every has that interest to have a global supply of critical minerals, not just the raw material, but the processed material that is usable for an industrial capacity. And Morocco shares that with everybody. Second is every country in the world has, even though they call it rare earth and critical, and they're not really that, country has some deposits of critical minerals. They're different ones in different parts of the world. And so I think Morocco, like any country in the world, would want to be able to use those natural resources in an environmentally responsible way to develop its own economy. And not just the mining, but potentially moving to the processing as well. And so what you look at is if a country in the world has strategic advantages in terms of what it can mine and when it can process, you want to create a network of countries, as many as possible across the world, where we have a reliable supply of critical minerals. This is critical for Morocco, and they can play a very key role because they do have critical mineral supplies that they can be mining, and that creates economic development. But I also think they have a vested interest, like every country I think does, in having a reliable and diverse supply across the world of processed and finished and refined materials that can be used for economic advancement in a cost-effective way. So I think Morocco plays a key role because of the deposits that it has, but also because of its willingness to invest in processing and its cooperation and being willing to be a part of this global initiative, which it will have to be a global initiative. No country in the world has every critical mineral that's valuable, and so it will rely on international cooperation. That right now, you have 90-something% of some of these elements controlled by one nation in one place. And that's just not healthy for the global economy, and it's certainly not healthy for security and stability. So Morocco can be a key part of that, and we're very happy they're here today and seated there at the table with us. So, okay.
Thank you. This concludes today's press
and I
availability.
apologize. I love doing long press conferences. I do a longer one, but we got to use this for the family photo. All right.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
is a critical